Hi everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's show, I think spring is finally here. If you listen long enough to the meteorologists, there are two spring seasons. For us bonsai enthusiasts, I think there are three. So for the weather folks, there's meteorological spring, which is the 1st of March. But then of course the actual spring happens a few weeks later on the 20th, 21st of the month, and that's the official move into spring. And then of course you have the third spring for us bonsai enthusiasts. And that's not really easy to figure out. It's not the 1st of a month, it's not the 20th of the month when the equinox or the solstice lands. It's whenever the evening temperatures are going to stay above freezing for at least several days in a row. Now I say that because, again, in the upper Midwest, it might be 40, 45 for the low for a week straight. And then there's going to sneak in there a couple of upper 30s, mid 30s, and then that one that goes to 34 degrees, 35. So in the 14-day planner, there are days where we're going to hit 60s and 70s. There was even a tease at an 80 on one of the 14 days of the 14-day forecast. And the lows were in the 40s and 50s. But look at week number 2, stretching out a little bit. Ooh, 35, 34, 37, 8. What are we to do? I think this year will be a little bit easier for the Bonsai Shuffle because we're so late in the season and we probably won't have a lot of really treacherously cold weather. Probably is the key word there. But the Bonsai Shuffle. As I take my trees out of the cabin cold frame a couple at a time, I think all of these trees will probably stay outside for eternity for the rest of this spring and summer and into fall. But when you've got those mid to low 30 threats, that's when things can get a little bit hairy. So we have the boxwoods, took them out, and they look glorious, and look at all the little tiny buds at the tips of these two trees. Now the cotoneasters always come out and bloom first in the cabin cold frame, and Jake's tree, which is the darker green of the two to the right, always grows faster, and it looks like it's already been in spring and summer for a couple of weeks or more. And then the other one, mine, is a little bit slower behind. But now if we get really, really cold temperatures, those really soft, supple leaves might get damaged if we get frost. And even the cold 30s, they might not like that for a while. I have my yews. The taxuses, they're probably going to be fine just as they are. I don't see any really new fresh buds going, so they're okay. The 3 small Siberian forests are out, and a couple of them have already started to leaf out, and one has not. The one that did not leaf yet will be fine out here because there's no leaves to burn or to get too cold from the weather. But the ones that have leafed out, they're super small leaves. But now, these Siberian elms, they have many pushes throughout the year. You can trim them, let them push out, you trim them, you let them push out. They're going to be just fine. But if it gets a little closer to 32, I might take the ones with the really small, supple leaves, and I might put those back in the cabin cold frame just for the overnight. I also have my juniper and the weeping willow. Now the weeping willow has those really light yellowy green kind of leaves, so they're very soft and just that tender stage. Those could freeze on a really cold night, but they'll push out some new growth, and they grow like weeds anyway, so I'm not too concerned about that one. But that's one of the few I'd probably put away because of that sensitivity. And the juniper will be just fine. That hasn't really shown signs of elongating quite yet, but it looks real green and lush and it's ready, but that now is going to stay out for the rest of the spring. Now I have a whole bunch of larch I took out as well, and those are all the ones I got last year. Whole bunch. I got 100 larch, put them into some pots. Now I'm going to be working with a bunch of MBS friends, and we're going to be doing a larch forest pretty soon. Now they are popping out. They're just starting to open up. You can see some of the green on some of the trees. We've got to do that repot here in the next week or two to promote the most chance for success. As soon as those larches start to really push out and those little green sprigs get a little bit long and soft and we start to repot, we could be sapping a lot of that energy. So we like to do the repot like when we have just that bud just pushing out right before those green foliage pieces start to show. But I think we'll be okay for another week or so. It's going to be weird though, because we're going to have temps in the 70s and 80s and things are going to want to push out big time. Last but certainly not least, it's the big maple. That's right, we chopped it in the wintertime. I've got buds that already started in the cabin cold frame, so there's about 6 buds right there that are on that top smallest branch. The goal is to get the Japanese maple to bud way down on the trunk, so not too worried about those upper leaves that are soft and maybe a little weaker, but I really want this one to succeed, so this one might be one I might push in on that evening that gets to that mid to lower 30 risk. We just have to watch the weather closer. Now, a week from now is going to change 3 or 4 times before a week from now, so that forecast I showed you on my app on my phone, yeah, we really can't rely on that. You know we have to be checking the forecast really on a daily basis this time of year, because none of us want to do the Bonsai Shuffle for too long. Of course, in and out and in and out. So back behind my garden are all the pine trees, so they wouldn't get too sunburned over the winter time. We're going to move all those out now into the sunshine today, get those on some benches. We'll do that in a moment. Then we have the larches that were sitting in here in the garden. We have all the boxwoods huddled up in this corner, and they're getting light, so some little winter burn on some of the tips of these. We'll move these out, getting some better light, and get these, make sure they're watered good. If you remember the April Fool's Day prank of about 10 to 12 inches of snow, this was covered in snow and bent over. We have all the black spruces and a big old larch there in the front there, that one. I left it up on this bench. And then the other gardens, we have the lilacs back there, one of the other larch trees, the amber maple in the back corner. Can't wait to see if that one's going to bud. We got some more boxwoods. We come over here, we got the Siberian fir, that really winter burn boxwood. We're going to have to cut out some of that dead stuff and see what's going on those two. Both of those got some damage this year. And then I've got the trees from the cabin that some of the critters got early on, but I think they're going to be okay. And we'll either put them into some pumice here in a few weeks, or we'll leave them right there in that box for a full year of growing. Now the critters chopped everything off of the big amber clump. We'll see how that shoots back. Now they grow profusely and have tons and tons of buds and suckers. And as a matter of fact, as I walk around here, I can see some red buds already right in here. So this thing will shoot out in the coming days and weeks with all this heat, and we will be just fine. A couple of things to consider with the Bonsai Shuffle. If you have a lot of trees and you have some iffy weather forecast, just leave them in the cold frame and just save the work. But so many of us are itching to get our trees out into this amazing, glorious sunshine and warmth, and we want this season of spring push to just hit now. I have a ton of trees, and I don't want to go back and forth, in and out a bazillion times. But I think the shuffle will be pretty mild this year because, again, we have a really good stretch of weather coming, and then it's mid-April and push in May, and things can always happen, but we can move a couple of trees. So consider the number of trees you have. Consider what kind of pots you have your trees in. If you have these really small pots, they're going to dry out faster, so make sure they're watered, but they're also going to get cold faster because they're small, and if they're exposed to the cold, they don't have a lot of soil inside them to regulate that heat. Because even though it's going to get down to maybe 34 that one night, it's going to be 37, 36, 35, maybe 34, then 35, 36, and it's that way for a half an hour. So if it's that way for half an hour, those bigger pots with more soil, they're not going to freeze. They're going to have that heat, you know, that thermal mass of the heat of the bunch of rocks in there, the big pot, it's going to be probably fine. Now, if it was cold for hours and got below freezing for hours, then your pot's going to have some trouble, right? And of course, it's the freezing that damages the buds, the new tender buds. So you have to be careful more of the buds, but don't forget about the roots. Bigger pots, more soil, can hold that moisture more typically, but it's also going to not fluctuate quite as fast with the hot cold. And for all the trees that are hardy to Minnesota, I don't really care if they freeze. You have to be careful of that foliage, like I mentioned on some of my trees. It's the leaves and the buds for new potential leaves that you really want to be careful about. Like the weeping willow that I mentioned earlier and showed you some of those pictures. Those leaves are so soft and brand new and not even the right color exactly. They are usually more yellowish when they come out, but they're so soft and they're not going to harden off for a long, long time. And now if I get full sun and in the 70s and even an 80 this week, they're just going to go like, whoa, what happened? So if your tree has brand new buds that are just opening up and you put them out into full sun all day, that's pretty tough too on the tree. So if things are budding out, my recommendation for anything that's budding out and new and young, make sure you put them into a partial sun. Maybe put them in shade for a good 1 to 2 weeks so they have a slow acclimation to the light. Now, they're going to get all kinds of really good light compared to the cold frame they were in, either mine, my cabin with the windows, or my garage one. They're going to get way more sunlight. It's indirect, but it's sunlight. So be safe and keep them more in the indirect light or shade for the first couple of weeks. Now, if they're Minnesota hardy again and they don't have any new buds elongating, they're going to be fine where they are, and the sun will just start to tell it, hey, let's really wake up and let's grow. One other thing I'd like to caution you on when you have the Bonsai Shuffle and just spring in general, we have tons of snow in my yard still. Some of the pots are actually still frozen into the garden where they're at. I have to really jiggle them hard to get them out or even use warm water. Those are going to be really slow in nursery soil to dry out. But if you have bonsai soil in your trees that were healed into the ground, they're going to dry out pretty fast. Make sure you're checking your trees for all that watering need, right? You may have to water, you may not have to water. You don't want them sitting in a whole bunch of water long term, but you don't want them to dry out. It's windy in the spring, the sun's getting hotter, and if you have bonsai soil in your trees, especially in smaller pots, make sure you're checking them because they are going to dry out. Now that they're outside in this beautiful air, they're going to dry out and they're going to be needing some water and they're going to be wanting to grow, and so you want to make sure you're really checking them carefully. The shuffle is done with the cabin cold frame. Now we have to go shuffle with the garage cold frame and see what we're going to take out and maybe put on a few benches. None of my larches have shown any pre-bud pushing, so I'm going to bring these outside and they'll be just fine even if it gets a little cold because I don't have any new fresh growth. So I'm going to take this one out for sure. Back over here we have the dwarf Alberta spruce forest with the other trees. You can't see them on the back side of. Those haven't pushed out any growth either. That can go outside as well. Now both these structures are big, heavy, hard to carry. In and out would be a really big pain in the butt, right? Also, there are some rocks in here that help keep the planting secure. It's probably time to consider taking these rocks out and having smaller rocks in there for decoration. But some of these, they're adding up to multiple pounds. I have a couple pounds of rocks in these, which make, again, going in and out really, really challenging. So keep that in mind when you're playing the Bonsai Shuffle. Now back here in my incredibly overcrowded garage is the slab with the birch forest. Yeah, the white paper birch. And I've got 2 trees that'll probably show off some white this year. The other one's slowly catching up and the maples are okay. Nothing is opened early on the trees here either. I do have some maple buds that are right there on the cusp. The problem with this tree and this forest is it's so heavy I can't do it by myself. So another thing to consider with the Bonsai Shuffle, I don't want to take this tree or my bigger ones or any of these from the garage before I know it's going to stay out there for good, because having to call my son to come pick this up with me and put it in the garage for a couple of nights is going to be really kind of a tough gig. But again, Minnesota hardy trees, but it's up in the air on a slab. So this is going to cool off, the rock's going to cool off, but the rock will also hold some heat, some thermal mass. But again, if it's in that mid-30 range, they should be okay. So be careful of where you're bringing your trees from, because you have to go up flights of stairs and go back down, up and down, back and forth multiple times. That's going to be kind of a pain, right? So you might not want to wait that extra couple of days or maybe even a week before you take those out. Now let's check the actual cold frame here in the garage. The plants in the cold frame here in the garage are looking really good. I've got a juniper, again, can go outside. I've got a Chinese elm that is actually starting to bud, so I have some little tiny buds. If it gets too cold, I may want to reconsider taking this one out or leaving it out. I have a couple of Japanese maples that have not pushed out any new growth. Those can go outside. And again, unless it gets below 35 degrees, 34, I'm probably okay. Then I have a couple of client trees in here which are looking really good, and they're going to want to get their trees outside too, but I don't want to risk their trees with any unnecessary cold, so I might keep these in here for a couple extra days. However, getting these outside in some of the nice sunshine, indirect or direct, depending upon the tree type, that'll be really good for these trees as well. So we'll take some of these out of the cold frame and put them in some spots and see what happens. I think that's going to do it for the cold frame from the garage. I got all my trees out. Everything is here. I got a couple maples off to your left there. But they're all set. I get a lot of shade here early in the day, and then a little bit of afternoon sun, and then it's going to be back behind some a little more partial shade. We should be in good shape. Now that everything's out and in place, I gotta practice what I preach, check for the dryness of the soil, and do some watering. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the Bonsai Shuffle Round 1. Hopefully we won't have to do any more shuffling. We'll move stuff around the benches in the spring. That's the fun part, but we hope to not have to go back and forth. Garage, cabin, cold frame, covered up. Let's hope, let's cross some fingers and toes that we are good for the season. Things are watered, things are checked out, things are in a place where they'll get partial sun, partial shade. And then we'll just keep an eye on them as we always do. Hey, thanks for watching. We've got some repotting to do. A lot of that coming up soon. All right, take care of you. Take care of your bonsai. Good luck with the Bonsai Shuffle. And we'll see you next time.